Hi, everyone. Very good. Welcome. Fine, crisp autumn morning here. The great Bodhidharma, the emperor said, "What is the first principle of a holy teaching?" And we can tell that's everywhere, isn't it? What's the mission of this organization? How is it going to make a profit? All those things. And Bodhidharma said, vast emptiness, nothing holy. And then the emperor said, well, who are you then? Standing in front of me, standing in the emptiness. And he said, Bodhidharma said, I do not know. And the emperor somehow spaced out. And that was the end of their dialogue. But now I've been thinking about refuge, partly because we've got a retreat coming up and we're doing it in about a little less than a week in person with a bunch of people. And it's sort of interesting because people have been selling their rakusus and getting them wrong and correcting them, which is always what happens. And hang on, mine's inside out. Is that okay? Or upside down or whatever it is. And then the teachers then they put, calligraphy on, work through a name, and a refuge name has to, in some way, express that not knowing, don't know who I am. So that's interesting. And then, in a way, a name might be aspirational, or it might just be some sort of description of some deep feeling about who you are. One of my teaching name is Healing Cloud. And most people in that lineage, not everybody, but most people had a cloud in their name, and I didn't actually have any choice of either of my personal name or my teaching name. But I could have, but I decided to spin the wheel. And a healing cloud. I'm not sure whether that fits me or not. But I like the cloud idea of floating along, floating along. Here's, and when you float along, you're like a cloud, you sort of experience the world differently. Here's Zhuangzi and Huizi were crossing a Hao River by the dam. Zhuang said, the fishes leap and dart so freely. That is their happiness. And Hui replied, since you're not a fish, how do you know what makes fishes happy? So that part of the mind that's always got like the peanut gallery, So it's like always got an objection. And Zhuang said, since you're not I, how can you possibly know that I do not know what makes fishes happy? It was pretty hard to take on Zhuang. So we argued, if I, not being you, cannot know what you know, it follows that you, not being a fish, cannot know what they know. Zhuang said, hang on, wait a minute, let's get back to the original question. What you asked me was, how do you know what makes fishes happy? From the terms of your question, you evidently know I know what makes fishes happy. I know the joy of fishes in the river through my own joy as I walk along that same river. Kind of pretty good, actually. I know that. So I think one of the things we miss the joy of animals and how much we are like them and how much we're in communication with them. So, I was thinking of, I really noticed this, I remember when I was meditating in the bush in Australia, and I noticed something sort of nudging my leg, and it was an echidna, a spiny anteaters, which they're only about this long, and they've got spines, and they're very ancient creatures. Angela Rockwell described them as dear ancient creatures. and in fact they are. They're sort of half blind, and they sort of walk along, and they have a rolling reptilian gait. They're very primitive. They lay eggs. They're mammals that lay eggs, you know. But he wanted to spend a little time with me while I meditated. I also wanted to lick the salt off my legs, you know. But also just like nuzzle me, you know. And I thought, I've had that experience a lot with animals while I'm meditating, and birds too. Birds will change their behavior significantly if you're meditating around them. They'll fly closer, they'll act like, I don't know, they'll act like, they won't be wary of you, and sometimes that means they'll act like you're not there. But it's also true that they'll be kind of friendly sometimes. And you can just feel the way their paths change. So I kind of thought, I like that about animals, the way animals pay a lot of attention to us, and they know what's going on with it. They're noticing us, even if we think they're not, and even if we're not noticing them. And so there are many, you know, stories about this, of course, with humpback whales, you know, coming in, saying hello to somebody who freed them from a net a year ago, or something like that. And humpback whales saving people from, saving divers from sharks, or saving lots of creatures from orcas. Humpback whales, you know, obviously not thrilled with orcas, since orcas eat their young. and so there are many stories about that, and I find it sort of touching how much animals sort of collaborate with each other. And you know, they'll walk around, like kookaburras will, I was just reading a story about a kookaburras raise their young collectively, so they have a lot of, some of the men don't go off, some of the young, and it's like the gay uncles who stay around and help raise the children, you know? And but sometimes if kookaburras kind of stuck, there's just two kookaburras, and you know, something happened to all the rest of the family, or they're starting a family, then it's great. They'll come and drop off their new baby with some humans who've been kind to them and been feeding them, so that they can look after the baby for a day or so while they go off to hunt them for themselves. And I kind of like that. Kookaburras using you as a babysitting service. So you'll keep the dogs off the babies and all that sort of thing. So I think there's a tremendous communion in animals, and that our consciousness, they too have consciousness, and all consciousness connects with all other consciousness. I don't know how much consciousness like stars have or mountains have. It seems like they do sometimes, but certainly animals have lots of consciousness. And I just want to say that when we're meditating, we're closer to that. We don't have the barriers. We're not holding the world off so much, you know. And one of the ways we hold the world off is by, well, the one about the joy of fish is by arguing with it and arguing about it, and instead of just like participating in it. And so what I think refuge is, it says, you don't have to know who you are, but it says you can enter the world. You can really let the world have you and wash over you and penetrate you. And it's a really different thing from doing things to the world. And so we've been, you know, we have a bunch of people around here. We have a number of birds, hummingbirds, who come and like knock on the window if the hummingbird feeder is empty, and they come and look. They give us the beady eye. Hey, come and fill the feeder and things like that. So hummingbirds are well known for this. And Alison had just told me this great story about our foxes the other day. Do you want to tell that story, Alison?
Sure. Well, I was just thinking about them and how that question of how do we know what a fish is thinking or what a fox is thinking. And we have this family of foxes that they had first we just saw the father, the original one, I don't know, months and months ago, way back in spring. And he was just trotting across the edge of the yard, and we that was the first touch of the encounter. And then eventually there's the mother and there's the three kits, at about a month ago that all of them started to show up, all five of them sort of rolling on top of each other and playing in the backyard. But this question of how do we know, and I remember looking up online, what do foxes like to eat? Because we've been feeding them. And they have all these lists of what foxes are supposed to like and not like. And our foxes are not really interested in the internet or what it has to say about this. They know what they like, and I simply have to pay attention to them. And they are exceedingly fond of dates. They will, and some of them of the family will, like, we'll put dates out or figs out, and some will eat just the dates and ignore the figs, or and eggs. Some of them will not even touch the eggs. So now we have, they go off and disperse in the autumn, and the males go who knows where. Apparently, they go miles and miles away. But we still have the mother fox and one or two kits that come and go. And the smallest is sort of the runt of the family of the kits. Very nervous personality, always sort of looking around and running into the bushes, terribly fearful. And I always worry for it. I worry for this little fox. So last night I just had a longing to see them. I wanted to see the foxes. And often we put dates out every night, and often the days are just gone. And but last night I waited for them, and the mother shows up with the kit, and they have this ritual where the mother goes to eat first, and the three little kits just sit quietly on the flagstones and wait. And last night there was just the little runt kit, and it was waiting there, and she ate her fill, and then there's still dates on the plate, but she picked one up and brought it to the little one and left it there and sort of nuzzled its face, and then went back to go eat. And the kit was so excited. And then it ran and snuck around a side way and snuck up to the plate and dashed in and grabbed one for itself and ran off and ate it. It was very pleased with itself. The mother just sort of looked at it, and I was watching all of this. And then I see the kit try the trick again, sneaking around and sneaking up to the plate. And the mother looks up and she just snarls at it. And the kit goes, running off. So I guess that's to say that, as John was saying earlier, we think that the trees and the birds are like, I don't know, the automobile or or the car, or the chair or something, that they don't notice us. But everything is one whole field of being. And my idea that the foxes or the birds can't feel me is the very thing that's holding off the the connection, the feeling of communion. It's not that they don't feel me, it's that I think they don't feel me. Yeah, that's it. Our foxes.
Thank you. Foxy locks, yes. we have a long history of the great or the grandmother of the current generation of foxes was a very daring and creative and imaginative creature. And she would not only come up and ask for things, she's just wandering. If we're having a party on the deck, she'd wander into the middle of the party to ask for things, talking to people, nudging them. And also, every time when she took food, often an egg or something, some of you know the story, but I had a little installation. A friend gave me a whole bunch of, like, I don't know what they are, pool balls or something, but with numbers on them. And she would, like, grab a round pool ball, which is sort of vaguely egg looking, I guess, but she always grabbed number 12 and she just put it in the place where the egg was. So that qualifies as a sense of humor for me. So and she's studying a game, in other words, And dogs will do that too. Dogs will play jokes and laugh and tease you and things, Dogs have particular warning bark for certain animals, like in Australia for certain snakes and things like that. But sometimes they'll give that bark, and then you'll rush around, and then they start laughing. They're grinning and laughing because they just tease you. There's no danger right now. So like that. This is kind of an odd poem, but it's sort of it's an interesting poem because it's very in a way it feels very exterior, but but it sort of comes in. It comes in close. And it's the one about Joanne Kygo, who lived in Bolinas, where we have a lot of retreats. It's for turkey buzzard. The past has vanished, the future being unborn has not come into existence, and the present cannot be fixed as being in the present. Timeless sighs. Whither rideth us? Aha! To what timeless shore shall we float in our quest, our homely quest for carrion? She's talking from the point of view of a turkey buzzard. Our homely quest for carrion. Come back, little heart, I miss you. Hey, big bird, you of the squashed consciousness, here in soft May Bolinas breeze on the porch, I want to fly overhead too with the crows, suddenly free, and down comes Mr. Blue Jay into the grasses. You with the most silver grey chest, and into the loquat. Fast, what's happening? And suddenly the sky changes, the earth gets still, waking in the night with sinkings of mortality. I'm still alive this morning. One would do well to just look this place where I begin, free each day to take the path. And I can get away with another couple of things here, I think. James Wright is a poet who has a lot about when consciousness lowers and the world starts coming into us. The old Japanese saying is when the self goes out to meet the 10,000 things, that's called delusion. When the 10,000 things advance and encounter the self, that's called enlightenment. So we're always talking about the way we, in some way, participate with the world. So here we are. This is James Wright. Today I was happy, so I made this poem. As the plump squirrel scampers across the roof of the corn crib, the moon suddenly stands up in the darkness, and I see that it is impossible to die. It's a nice leap, isn't it? The moon suddenly stands up in the darkness, and I see that it is impossible to die. Each moment of time is a mountain. An eagle rejoices in the oak trees of heaven, crying, "This is what I wanted." There's a koan that goes, this teacher comes to his teacher, Wangbo comes to his teacher, and he's big, and he comes from, comes from far away. And, oh, where do you come from? Asks. And he says, from the north. And he says, what did you come for? And he says, not for anything else. It's a great answer. Not for anything else. This. The eagle rejoices in the oak trees of heaven, crying, this is what I wanted. So it's interesting that Wang Bo, who understood that already, nonetheless felt it would be good to be inside, I suppose, the cooking pot, inside the vessel of Zen, and became a great teacher. And I think that there's something about refuge. I think, well, why do we do refuge and things like that? Something I was originally quite opposed to, not opposed to, but I just couldn't see the point of. And it so happened that we didn't have an opportunity in our community. We didn't do it very much, and the Japanese didn't like to let go of their control of doing it, things like that. And but then later on, I realized, oh, it's about that. It's about being in the vessel, being in the alchemical vessel together, turning from black to silver to gold, turning from grey or mud to something clearer, And so that alchemical process is what happens. And refuge, I think, symbolizes that. So people have those names. And this is a somewhat local poet called Ada Limon, who I used to pretend to believe in. It's called Miracle Fish. I used to pretend to believe in God. Mainly, I liked so much to talk to someone in the dark. I can appreciate that. I talk to people in the dark too. I talk to people who are dead sometimes in the dark. Think of how far a voice must have to travel to go beyond the universe. How powerful that voice must be to get there. Once, in a small chapel in Chimayo, New Mexico, I knelt in the dirt because I thought that's what you were supposed to do. That was before I learned to harness that upward motion inside me, before I nestled my head in the blood of my body. There was a sign and it said, this earth is blessed, do not play in it, but I swear I will play on this blessed earth until I die. She's always arguing with the instructions, I relied on a miracle fish once. I think a miracle fish tells your fortune. Is that right? I think, yeah. Seeing a few nods here, so yeah. I relied on a miracle fish once in New York City to tell me my fortune. And that was before I knew it was my body's water that moved it. Before I knew it was my body's water that moved it. That the massive ocean inside me was what made the fish swim. Fish swimming. And I think this is Saigyo. Deep in the mountains, water from rocks, drip, drop, me gathering chestnuts, falling, plop, plop. So the way in which we just, if you go off into the mountains, gathering chestnuts is probably good, then gradually, that which holds you away from the world stops holding away from the world, and you start entering things. And here's autumn chrysanthemums have beautiful color. This is Tao Chan, translated by Wu Chi Liu, a Chinese poem. I don't know when Tao Chan lived, but no, I don't think it's super old, but maybe. Nice thing about China is they had so many poets for so many millennia, Autumn chrysanthemums have a beautiful color with dew On my clothes I pluck their flowers. People make tea, chrysanthemum tea. With dew on my clothes I pluck their flowers. I float this thing in wine to forget my sorrow, to leave far behind my thoughts of the world. Alone I pour myself a goblet of wine. When the cup is empty, the pot pours for itself. As the sun sets, all activities cease. Homing birds, they hurry to the woods, singing. Haughtily, I whistle below the eastern balcony. I've found again the meaning of life. Whistling with the birds. And I think what I'd like to do now is probably I'll read one more poem. This is Denise Levertov, which is another one about the consciousness, how the whole universe is really conscious together. Come into animal presence. Come into animal presence. No man is so guileless as the serpent. The lonely white rabbit on the roof is a star twitching its ears at the rain. The llama, intricately folding its hind legs to be seated, not disdains but mildly disregards human approval. Not disdains but mildly disregards our approval. What joy when the insouciant armadillo glances at us and doesn't quicken his trotting across the track and into the palm brush. What is this joy? That no animal falters but knows what it must do? That the snake has no blemish, that the rabbit inspects his strange surroundings in white star silence? The llama rests in dignity, the armadillo has some intention to pursue in the palm forest. The armadillo has some intention to pursue in the palm forest. Those who were sacred have remained so. Holiness does not dissolve. It is a presence of bronze. Only the sight that saw it faltered and turned from it. And old joy returns in holy presence. So I think that's it, isn't it? The old joy that returns in holy presence. It's the same as James Wright saying, today I was happy, so I made this poem. So, fair enough. I'll take that kind of happiness. When Bodhidharma says, I do not know, when he's asked who he is, I think that, it's kind of nice because he's not overly shaping things. As soon as you know, I'm this, well, I don't know. It's rather constraining, isn't it? Kids know that, They don't like you to describe them. Just the same way some indigenous people don't like you to photograph them. So yeah. So there's something about, I think, taking refuge. Many people say it's becoming a Buddhist, but I think more it's like that. It's taking refuge in this moment that lasts forever. Now we will live forever. It's like that. And this moment will never cease, like that. So if you just notice this moment, it's here. And if you stop trying to hold on to it, it just goes on, and it's here again, and here again, and here again. And so if that's puzzling to you, great, then that's the koan quality of it starting to work and disturb us. This moment lasts forever. Refuge, and so that's why we take refuge. And we take refuge in the thusness. I think this is really, I suppose this is why love is hard to understand, because you can feel when you're really just letting it come to you. Your connection with another person, then you're not trying to make them do anything or feel anything. Or yourself feel anything or do anything. It's just this. Michelle Riddle. Michelle Riddle, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Hi.
Mm.
I was thinking about this story. Uh, a few weeks ago, I don't know, maybe a little more than that. Uh, I was sitting about where I am now, and my husband, partner's outside working on the house. And he came in and he showed me this little hummingbird that had flown into a window and crashed and died. It was really beautiful, and he was showing me how pretty it was. And it became clear that he something happened in the encounter for him with the hummingbird, and I was sort of peripheral, but I was brought in along the way. And he found himself moved to do this ceremony for this hummingbird, and he was working with wood, so he built like a little coffin for the hummingbird. And he thought, oh, maybe I'll put a lid on it. And then he thought, no, birds need to fly. And he had all these wood chips that were right there because he'd been planing wood. And so this curly wood made this soft bed for the hummingbird. And it was so lovely lying there in its box. And he ended up taking the bird and finding a burial spot and just putting some herbs on top of it. And the whole thing was just kind of amazing. And I was just sitting here now thinking about it, and my impression of it was just how, when we get out of the way, how the kindness of the universe moves through us. But for me, I kept feeling somehow this was for him and for me, but for the bird, there was something like the bird was royalty. I don't know, but it was a beautiful thing and a beautiful communion between the animal world and the human world. So that's what I was sitting here contemplating again.
Thank you very much. Don Joseph.
John, you were talking about finding names and names for refuge, and I was working with somebody. I'm sure he doesn't mind if I mention his name, Ewan. Over the last year, and he decided that he wanted to take refuge, and so we went through the process. And he writes a lot of poetry, and so we have these koanic responses, to the various vows. And it's funny, he got together a spreadsheet, and the first column was the first response, and then some of them continued for 3-4 responses through the month. Some of them stayed as was and changing all the time. But it was fun to work with him. And then we got to the end, and I said, well, let's work on a name. And so I said, what I remember was when you first came here, you told a story, and you came just as COVID was starting, I think, where you were diving at night in Oman, and he's a master diver. And he was teaching English in Oman for many years with friends. And it was nighttime, and you and your friends were looking for octopuses. And you hadn't seen any octopuses for months, nothing. And there was just nothing around. And you turned off your light, and he said he saw a little movement, and he put out his hand, and all of a sudden the baby octopus landed in his hand. And he closed his hand like that, and the octopus squeezed through his fingers, swam a little bit out, and then landed again in his open palm. And he did that again and again, playing with this baby octopus. And he looked up and he realized that the moon was shining down through the water. The full moon was shining down through the water and lighting up the octopus in his palm. So I said, well, I wrote him an email and I said, well, here's some Chinese characters and might be nice. And the first was a pretty safe name, and I suggested, well, how about what do you think about moonlit sea? The moon being Buddha nature and vast ocean, and kind of a nice name, moonlit sea. And then I was looking through, and I looked up the Chinese character for octopus, and the ancient Chinese is just octopus, but the Japanese slang is for fool. And I thought, well, here's another possibility, but how about moonlit octopus? And I just have to warn you that in slang, Japanese for octopus is fool. And immediately he took that name, and he said, that's just so much of my nature, to be that fool. And so he became Moonlit Octopus as his Dharma name. And it's a really lovely process.
Thank you. It was beautiful. Angela Rochel is on here somewhere, I think.
Well, great hearing all the stories. Well, I have a lovely experience that happened yesterday. It's spring here. It's been raining, and cold, but the days are getting longer, so everything is rushing now to nest and have the marsupials have all got young at foot, and everything is flourishing. The grass is growing. There's fresh tips on all the trees. And yesterday, not only was it not raining, but it was just the most euphorically clear. When it's been raining, there's that sense of everything just lifting away when the sun comes out. So I was out in the paddocks, just out not far from the house, just sitting, watching. There's some beautiful, very subtle coloured, they're called swamp hens or native hens or narkies because of this crazy sound they make. And I knew they had young because when they've got young, they make this fabulous, from right inside their bodies, soft kind of dunk, 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 that they use to communicate with the young. So I was just sitting watching them. The other thing that happens at this time of year to cash in on all the birds that are nesting, there's 3 different kinds of cuckoos that come around, and one kind likes to sit on fence posts, and you see them kind of swooping from one fence post to the other. So they swoop down and then land, and from there they're surveilling the little, much smaller birds, usually, that they lay their eggs in the nests of. The smaller birds have got their own strategies, obviously, or they'd all be out of business. They do things like make false nests or sing passwords to their eggs, so it's to their chicks still in the egg, so that the cuckoo's egg has been laid a bit later than their own eggs, and the young have longer to learn the password. So a whole lot of strategies. Anyway, I was sitting watching the swamp hens, and sure enough, they brought out their little black fluffball chicks. They're about this big, just little black balls of down with legs. So just really sitting with them. And then I became aware of a movement right close to my face, and I turned and looked to come face to face with a cuckoo that was swooping to land on me. So it saw me and I saw it, and it still just landed on my head. and, and sat there for 3 or 4 minutes, and I could hear it. It wasn't singing. They're usually quite quiet when they're doing their surveillance, but I could hear it swallowing, and I could feel it moving. So it was, moving its feet around and flicking its tail as they do. So we just sat for some time, and then it went on to the next fence post. But clearly it knew I was there because I was just breathing and moving as I wanted to, and I knew it was there, but it had decided to sit on me anyway. So that's my being with the animals story.
Thank you very much. Very good. That's great. My life is a fence post. And I love the way cuckoos ask us, we don't care. We're just going to sit on you anyway.
That's right. That's right.
That's great. George Foy, you're hard to find because your name is not on your name. So, George Foy, anything about what is refuge for you? What is not for anything else for you?
Refuge is hard to find. I was I loved some of the stories, and the cuckoo and the moonlit octopus. I find refuge in these stories. I find refuge in being with animals. What you said about names and animals, I think, was sending me off in a different direction. We just lost our cat. It was a beautiful Maine coon cat named Pippin, and he was 19 years old when he died just a couple of months ago, and he was really part of our family. We took refuge in him, that's for sure. But my children were young when he came into our family, and he was loved. He was loved as much or more than a lot of humans that we knew. And it made me think about what was it in the name animal that seemed to restrict people's understanding of how much he was loved and missed, and which in turn made me think how we restrict ourselves through these definitions. There's something called the Markov blanket, which defines how we pull together enough commonalities to define something like an animal or a human. But if you break out of those definitions and think of this cat as being loyal and loving and part of the give and take of who we were, he was a family member. And if you bust that definition another way and look at some of the science of it, 90% of a cat's genes are the same as ours. So does that make us cats, or does that make him human? Or the fact that we have our bodies are 30 trillion cells of our bodies are human, but 40 trillion cells of our bodies are bacteria. So are we humans or bacteria? But it's breaking out of those definitions and exploring what's beyond that allows us, I think, to belong to what we're exploring and to love what we're exploring. And it's just a long roundabout way to explain how I guess we all took refuge in this cat through a lot of vicissitudes and losses in our family. And that's all. Thank you.
Very good. Pippin. Pippin is the explanation. So here's an amusing Isa poem. Not yet become a Buddha, this ancient pine tree dreaming. that wren looking here, looking there, you lose something. The nice thing about Isu is always in a conversation with the animals. Cricket chirping in a scarecrow's belly. A huge frog and I staring at each other. Neither of us moves. Don't worry, spiders. I keep house casually. These sea slugs, they just don't seem Japanese. Why have you come here? Asked the great teacher. Not for anything else, said the great student. He was very tall, and so the teacher actually said, magnificent and imposing, where do you come from? He was like 7 feet tall. And he said, magnificent and imposing, I come from the north. and why have you come? Not for anything else. And this, whatever you're doing now, this is where you came to the earth. Whatever is happening in your life. So after a while you realize, oh, it's not any use complaining about this or that, or this loss that happened, or something was unfair, or diagnosis came. People I care about were not behaving to my satisfaction. But you're here not for anything else. Not for anything else. Refuge. In what do we take refuge? Refuge, refuge, refuge in this, and this.